Welcome back to our online viewers, those that are videocasting or podcasting. We have done our intro and foundation. Was the foundation helpful?
Yes.
Biblical, spirit of prophecy. Now the question is, do we walk the walk? That's the question. Now we're going to get into the 8 key ingredients. Page 22. I have here, pretend this is a 3-legged stool. Okay? You have to put on your creativity here. With a 3-legged stool, if you take out one of the legs, what happens to the stool? It falls over. There are 3 key parts to group. And if you pull out one of the legs, it will fall over. I guarantee it. The first leg is the loving. We're on page 22. You've heard the phrase people say, I don't care how much you know until... We know this well, right? Loving is a key part of the group. There's a danger, though. If loving becomes the end-all, be-all, let's just kind of have warm, fuzzy, kissy-kissy, kumbaya, lovey groups. There's a danger. Loving can become a we, us, ourselves mentality. That is deadly in a group. The second leg, again, this is a 3-legged stool, not a 4-legged. The second legged is a hand and glove. You know a coin, there's 2 sides to every coin? So the second leg has 2 parts. It's the learning and the serving. The learning, as you will see later on, is the Bible and the Bible only. We'll get to that later on, how to do that. There's a danger. Learning without the loving relationships is legalism. And many of you have lived long enough or grown up in churches where they have all the head knowledge accurate and can pin it to the wall, and they'll pin you to the wall too if you don't get it right. And they don't have the heart. That is legalism. The flip side of that coin, though, is the serving. Serving is the love in action. You've heard these phrases. They don't walk there. They're derogative phrases, aren't they? They don't practice what they... The serving is what makes the learning real. But there's also a danger with the serving. Serving without the Savior can become self-serving. We do this. Here's how we do it. Let's say that Edwin here comes up to me and he does something for me. Instead of just a heart full of saying thank you, what am I sometimes tempted to say? I owe you one. What are we doing? We're keeping score. And if I do something for Edwin and he doesn't show enough appreciation, you owe me one now. I mean, I'll just be right up front and tell him he owes me one. And what we're doing is it is a very subtle way of, it's not service with no strings attached. It's, you scratch my back, I'll keep track, and I'll scratch your back. The good old boy syndrome. I'll protect you, you protect me. Folks, that is not service. That's the danger. And then the third leg of this 4-legged stool is the reaching. Help me out. Groups exist. I think you're getting it. Groups exist for those who are not yet in them. And the third leg is outreach. There's a danger. Without loving relationships, people often get discouraged and we could all tell the stories of evangelistic events of various kinds. People are excited, and only 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later, we don't know where some of them are. In Orlando here, do we have? I'm new here, so I'm still getting to know. Do we have a store called Fry's? Fry's Electronic Superstore? Any from the Northwest who know what the equivalent? I guess Best Buy is no. You know the Costco type stores, huge things. It is a nerd's paradise. Okay, all kinds of stuff. When I lived in Oregon, I lived 3.5 hours away from the only Fry's in the state. It was in the Portland area, and I lived over on the Oregon coast. Beautiful country, by the way. And I build computers. I build them on the side, and I would help church members upgrade their computers, collect the old parts, build new computers with the old parts for people who wanted to get into computers. Had a blast. Well, there was one part that I had on my shopping list for next time I went to Fry's. So one day we go to Fry's. My family, we'd all go to Portland, 3.5-hour trip. My wife would never take the kids in Fry's, and if you've ever been in Fry's, huge, horrible movies on these massive screens, and we don't have a television at home, so it would be, what on earth is all this stuff? My kids aren't used to that. We do gardening and dirt and worms. And so my wife would take them to the park, and I'd go into Fry's, and I went in for a very specific part. And I'm cruising down through Fry's over to the real nerdy section where they have all these little trinkets and pieces. It's not keyboards or computers. It's the little parts and detail stuff. And I'm looking along, and finally I find the part that I'm looking for. And the peg is empty. That's what I did. Oh. So I'm thinking, this store is large enough, it's got to be around here somewhere. So I trot off to go find a Fry's employee. Now I'm cruising down the aisle, and I come to the corner, and there's a gentleman in a white shirt. Fry's all wear white shirts, employees. But his back is towards me, so I walk up to him and I tap him on the back. And he turns around, and without even thinking, I just launched right into what I'm looking for. And about halfway through my explanation and question, I look down, and his logo does not say Fry's. It said Earthlink, Internet Service Provider. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I was looking for an employee here," and indignantly he put his hands on his hips, and he looked at me and said, "Try me." I said, "Okay, here's what I'm looking for." And I finished explaining it, and he said, "Yeah, it's over on aisle 7B. I said, "Well, thank you." And guess where I just come from? 7B. And it was empty. So guess who I'm going back to? I turn around and wind my way back through, and I tap him on the shoulder, and he turns around, and he says, "Oh." I said, "They're out of stock. Is it somewhere else?" He said, "Yeah, over on aisle 13A. You should find it there too." And I'm thinking, wonderful. So I go cruising on over, and I get to aisle 13A, and it's all monitors or something, and it's the wrong stuff. And so I turned around and wound my way back through, tapped him on the shoulder again, and I says, "It's all monitors." He said, "Really? Let me go with you." So he walks with me through the store. We get over there. He says, "Yep, it used to be about right here, but it's..." He looked at me and he said, "We will solve your problem." And so he goes to the end of the aisle and flags down a Fry's employee who's cruising by, and he's obviously in a hurry, this guy, and he says, "We're looking for da-da-da." And the Fry's employee leans over quietly to this Internet Earthlink guy and said, "Would you take care of our customer for us? I've got to get this out to the shipping dock and da-da-da-da." And I heard this. And the Earthlink guy turns back to me and he says, "I'm sorry, he's very busy, but we will get your problem solved." So we wind through the store. Long story short, the store is completely out of stock. He turns back to me and he says, "I'm sorry." He says, "But I'm curious." And I said, "Yeah, I'm sorry too. I live 3.5 hours away, and I can't get back here when they have it stocked in 3 days." And he says, "I'm sorry." He said, "But I'm curious." He says, "I want to show you something. Come follow me." And so without even thinking, I wound through the store where I had first met him. And this time he turns around in front of a booth that's at the end of an aisle. And there's a big banner over the top that says, Earthlink Internet Service Provider. And he looks at me and he says, I'm curious, who is your internet service provider? The bottom of page 22. This is a quote that many of us have heard, but I'm going to translate it a little differently. Earthlink's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. You tracking with me? See where I'm reading? Earthlink mingled with men and women as one that desired their good. True or false? Did he do an awesome job? Earthlink showed his sympathy for me. True or false? True. Earthlink ministered to my needs. True. Earthlink won my confidence. Did Earthlink stop there? He bid me follow Earthlink. Yeah, the question is, did I? Here's the point. Christ's method alone. Folks, don't misunderstand me. There's nothing about huge, big-time preaching here. This is relational. There's nothing about church buildings here. This is all about what? People. Jesus died for people. I'm afraid sometimes. I took business. I've studied advertisement. The advertisement world has stolen what you and I should be the best at. And what has happened is there are some groups, you will recognize them as I describe them, who go to door, 2x2s. And because they are known as 2x2ers, by the way, where'd they get that idea from? Because besides, they're the fastest growing in secular Western culture, the United States. And they go door to door. They understand going. But yet here we are with the eternal gospel of Jesus Christ, and Satan says, oh, they got all the right head knowledge, but because of our pride and not wanting to be associated, we've taken and we have our holy huddles. And we've missed it. Christ's method sometimes. No. Christ's method what? Alone will have success in reaching the people. Page 23. We are going to focus here now. That's when your group starts. Groups are a way of life. We are going to focus on the first 11 weeks. What are these 8 principles, these 8 key ingredients that you need in your groups for them to be healthy, vibrant, authentic, going, group planting groups? On page 23, you see the big picture, and it has 4 columns in it, and they're very creatively titled. The first one is called First, and the second one's called. Those represent 4 quarters in a year. All we are going to focus on is the first quarter. Now, in the first quarter, you see the 3-legged stool divided into 3 sections, 3 pieces of the pie, right? Which piece of the pie is the biggest piece? Second quarter, you notice things change, right? That naturally happens, so I'm not worried about that in your groups. But the first quarter are when people are saying, do I trust you? Do people trust people today? No. Do you love me? Do you have hidden agendas? Are you going to use me? Are you going to abuse me? Are you going to take advantage of me? Can I trust you? And you have got to answer that question in your group. It will never be verbalized, but you've got to answer that question in your group because they will ask it silently. How do you answer those questions? The first one, we're at the bottom of page now, page 23, under loving, is called icebreakers. That is on page 34, so while I'm writing this up here, turn to page 34. Now that you've turned to page 34, hold your finger there and turn back to page 27. 27. It doesn't have a page number on it, but it's called Practical Tools. This is an alphabetical list of a number of resources in this training manual. We will not be looking at all of these. We're only going to cover the top 8. But I happen to know that come week 12 and 13 and 3 and 6, 9 months out, I know the questions that groups start dealing with because I've done this for 20 years. So I've included the resources that will help you later on. And of course, you have my phone number, right? You have my email. I am here to mentor you. Just got off the phone with a lady out in California. She went to her pastor and she said, I'd like to start a group in our church. And by the way, online, this is what I told her, online, the download link, there's a sermon series called Nobody Stands Alone. She took my sermon series, which is it's an audio, which you listen to it. She preached it in her church. She called me up scared to death. She says, I have 27 people that have signed up. She says, what do? I said, that's a wonderful problem to have, but it's a problem. And so we're going to focus in on the first 11 weeks. So back to page 30, 34? Icebreakers. Give me a quick show of hands. How many of you are familiar with icebreakers in groups? It's a common principle. Okay, a number of you. Icebreakers help level the playing field. They are something easy that lets the group get to know each other a little better and also prepares them for the study. Icebreakers are not just a random question you choose. And I'll teach you how to do this. Here's the key. Understand the principles of each of these 8 pieces of the puzzle. When we wrap up today, you will step back and you'll look at the whole picture, right? Right now, I know what the whole picture looks like, but you don't. And you'll be able to step back and you'll say, oh, now that all makes sense. So understand the principles of each of these pieces of the puzzle. There are 8 of them. Icebreakers. Use icebreakers in every meeting, every group meeting. Now here are 2 bullets. I'm going to quiz you on these later on. A co-leader always goes first. We did an icebreaker here, didn't we? Yes. Who went first? I did. And I gave you 15 seconds, but I modeled it in how many seconds? 7 to 12-ish. If you, as a co-leader, kick off the icebreaker question and you spend 5 minutes, what standard have you set for everybody else? And the people in your group who are new or who are shy or uneasy, they're thinking, this is not a safe place. I have to do lots of talking. And they're looking for the fastest way out that door. You've got to answer these questions. Do I belong? Is it safe? Do you love me? Can I trust you? Tracking with me? Second bullet says, this is the only time you go around the circle as people answer the icebreaker question. Why do you go around the circle? Have you ever been in committee meetings? and you have one of those long-time mature Christians who sit in the committee meeting. You know one of the happy Christians? The one of the ones you hope you live next to in heaven? And they sit there and they have a reputation for being critical. And they're silent the whole thing. Are these safe people? They are not safe people. The reason you go around the room, around the circle, is you want everyone to open mouth. Even if they open their mouth and all they say is, you know, I can't think of anything. You just simply say, oh, come on. Can't go any further till you get it. Can't you come up with something right now? Is that safe? No. Not a problem. We'll check back with you when we finish up going around the circle. Because as people share, it's sparking ideas in other people's minds. Oh yeah, I had a friend. Oh yeah, okay. I've had people that said, I can't think of anything. I said, not a problem. You get all the way around the circle, and I forgot them. And they said, they want to participate. If someone, all they say though is can't think of anything, you come back to them, can't. Mouth opened, mission accomplished. When a person opens mouth, even to say, I can't think of anything, they have become an active participant in that circle. And the group sees them as a participant, and they see themselves as a participant instead of as the silent observer. You catch the difference? Icebreakers. Any questions on icebreakers? Pretty straightforward? All right. That's the first of the puzzle. Let's go back to page 23. The next one says group building activities. We're going to skip that for now. That comes from the college days, from the teenage days. Have you ever done one of those silly games? You know, you tie a balloon to everyone's ankle, and then it's a case of stomp out everyone else's balloon. And the person with the balloon that doesn't get stomped out at the end, they're the winner. Adults forget that they're adults. That's what activities are. They help adults who are all prim and proper learn to have fun as a Christian again, instead of the good old boy syndrome. You know what I'm saying? So there's a whole collection. You can find dozens of these. You can come up with better ones than we have, but that's where that comes from. The last one is the blessing list. It's on page 40. Give me a quick show of hands if you're familiar with the blessing list in groups. Okay, basically nobody here, and that's okay. The blessing list on page 40 we're going to do a blessing list right here. For your blessing list, you need to go to Walmart and get corrugated cardboard. It's cardboard that when you stand it up, it doesn't go like that. It has the corrugated stuff running through it. We're going to need a couple empty chairs. Would you quietly step out and just get a couple of them and just, we can set them here. Okay. With your blessing list, which is a corrugated piece of cardboard, always sits on a chair in your group, the living room, wherever it is. Now remember, what questions are the silent questions you're having to answer? Do I belong? Is this safe? Do I trust you? You're going to take advantage of me? How does the blessing list work? On it, you write blessing list. And then you can do up your own, or you can go to growthgroups.us, and on the download page at the very bottom, you will find this. You recognize this? May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face to shine. It's in the top right-hand corner of your page 40 there. Then you take a bunch of colorful markers. This usually happens around week 2 or 3, but don't worry about that now. Understand the principles of this blessing list. And you take around week 2 or 3 and start randomly writing people's names. You getting the picture? All over this blessing list. Thank you. What message does that send the people? They haven't gone up there and they did not write their name. You wrote their name. They haven't said, I belong. You have told them you're part of the group. Now, the first bullet on blessing list says, start a new blessing list each year. The blessing list is not like church membership. Once a member, always a member. Okay? The blessing list is something you start each time, a new one. Because let's say here that Jeff has been coming to our group, but he moves or his job changes where he can no longer come to my group and he's going to go to your group. You don't go up. Where is Jeff? There he is. No. You start a new one each year. Will Jeff get on the new one next year? No. It's natural. And it sends the message. Now we'll talk about this later, this blessing right here, because you use that in the closure of your group. You also use the blessing list. If we're at group tonight and my friend Sally is at a wedding or she's gone for some reason and her name's up here, at the end of every group, you pray for the people that are absent from your group that are on the blessing list. What does that tell them? If I'm absent, I'm not forgotten, like it happens in church. If I'm absent, I am lifted up by name in prayer. Amen. The blessing list is not a prayer request list. It is only to communicate you belong. Does it make sense? Our society has changed. It used to be, we're back on page 23. It used to be that people asked the question, what do you believe? And then, once they understood what the correct belief was, then what had to happen next? Behavior. They had to behave. H-A-V-E? That's behave. They had to behave the right way, right? You tracking with me? Once they behaved the right way, then they could be baptized, which equaled belonging. Does that make sense? Does that resonate? Our culture is now upside down. People are not asking the questions of belief first. They eventually ask them, but they don't ask those questions first. What's the question they ask in today's culture? They say, do I belong? You see these internet cafes all over the place. This is what the bars used to be. Why did people go to the bars? Well, the obvious, but what else? Social. Sense of belonging. By being social and coming close to the people. We have a question. Let's get the mic over and I'll take you in just a moment. After belonging, you know this, by beholding we become changed. Behavior happens based on the people you hang out with. Why do you think we spend so much time making sure our kids have the right friends? Because they identify with them. And then it blows me away. What do? We, lock, stock, and barrel, bring in the television like it's going to have no effect on my kids. And we sit our kids and us in front of that tube for hours and hours, and we let it roll in the background. And the value system of the world infiltrates, and we think it's not going to make a difference. Folks, it's thinking. It doesn't connect up. Get rid of the tube. That's the moral of that story. Okay, no more preaching. That's meddling. Belonging leads to behavior. Once they are around, they ask the questions. Why you go to church on Saturday? I've always been curious. I see you. Why? They ask the believing questions. And what happens in today's culture is once they have sensed belonging, they've hung out with authentic Seventh-day Adventist Christian believers. And they've understood the Sabbath. People embrace this stuff now. We had a neighbor down around the corner, has a huge garden. We run huge gardens. Some of you have been to our house and know that they're even bigger now. We've got them all planted. And we came from the Northwest, where the average temperature was 65 degrees. You do gardening differently on the Oregon coast than you do here in Orlando. And so we took, and I went down to him, because he had a beautiful garden. I knocked on his door with my kids, and I said, we're new to the area, and we have no idea how to do gardens in Florida. We came from the Northwest. How do we do gardens? Man, he came to the door, first of all. His eyes lit up. He turned off the TV, and he spent 2 hours with us in that garden, pulling stuff. Kids, here, grab carrots, cutting stuff. We went home with bushels. Well, one Sabbath afternoon, we're heading back. We swing by his place. His wife was home, and he had not met my wife. So we pull in. We did a U-turn in the road and pulled in. And 2 more hours. In the course of that conversation, he said, why are you dressed up? I said, now listen to what I said. I said, we're Sabbath keepers. And we just came from a meeting with a group of other Sabbath keepers. Oh, he said, I believe Saturday is the right day too. Wow. And he said, let's see, Sabbath, are you Seventh-day Adventist? And I said, we sure are. And he said, oh, I've been to a Seventh-day Adventist church. I said, really, what was it like? You hear the heart? You're asking for their story. He said, well, my wife and I, we went to an Adventist church here in this area. And we walked in. Well, we drove in. He said, and we drove in. And ooh. Now, he has a mid-90s Taurus. But he looked at that parking lot. Nice, classy cars. Not everyone, but a number of them. He said, so we found a place to walk, and we went on in. He looked around at the dress, leaned over to his wife and said, these folks have money here. I mean, we're talking the dress, the suits, the ties, the tie clips, as long as it doesn't touch the skin. And on it goes. And he looked around and he said, wow, these people live well. Opened up the program. On the back of the program was the church budget. It was in the red. Leaned over to his wife and said, this is a group of people who live and dress and drive like this, but they can't even keep their church out of the red. And he got up and he walked out. He will never again go back into an Adventist church. When I told him about some things we were working on, dealing with house churches, he was excited. I'm coming, let me know. I want to be part of that group. Sabbath keeper will never walk back in. They look to belong, they behave, believe, which at the right time leads to baptism. You see how our culture's changed? Any questions on the blessing list? Oh, and I'll take your question. What you don't want to do is put the first name here, the second name there, and the third name there. What does that tell about the person who's down here? Totem pole stuff. Don't do it. You had a question.
Gangs on the increase around the nation, especially in Orlando. Teenage gangs in particular. And they've done research and found out the reason why the teenagers are joining gangs is because of a sense of belonging. They have no one to
White boy.
come in contact with and to be around, continually.
The other one.
And this is the same thing we're talking about, the sense of belonging. It's more of a negative term, for them. They do, bad things, but the point is they want a sense of belonging.
If you want to read a troubling book, it's called The Search to Belong, and it shows the quest of the American public to find a place to belong. I just recommend it. Incredible, but it will be a troubling book to read. A question. So another clarifying question.
Sure. When do you put people on the blessing list? Is it their very first time they come?
Okay, when do you put them on? I'm going to put you on hold because we'll cover that a little bit later. But the short answer is usually after the second or third time. Good questions. Any other questions we can put on hold? Send that mic on back. While it's getting back there, let's go back to page 23, and I'll write up the next one here. The next one, okay, we've talked about the whole loving thing, right? Now we're going to move to the reaching. Here's the quiz question. Groups exist. And our next one is the open chair. That is found on page 63. Okay, clarifying question.
My question was on the blessing list. Who puts the names up, and how do you start putting the names up? Is that
Good question. Who puts the names up? The co-leaders do. Co-leaders are the ones that put the names up. When do you start putting the names up? After the second time that a person has come to your group. We'll cover that in a little more detail later on. Good questions. Good questions. Okay, page 63. How many of you have ever heard about the open chair? It's a common thing in groups. Open chair is real simple. Always, 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 and they say never say always. Always have more chairs than people. Have you ever heard of the Pareto principle? It's also known as the 80-20 rule. When a Walmart's parking lot, why is it so big? When they know that parking lot is 80% full, they will drive to Target to find a closer spot. Restaurants, 80% full. Let's go down the street. Churches, 80% full. We got to still get this church filled before we do anything different. No. It's the 80. You need to have at least 20% more chairs than people. It sends the message. What message does it send? If they're all full, sorry, buddy, you missed out. I mean, that's kind of what's happened here, right? But if there are always chairs, this group exists for those who are not yet in. And did Christ ever close off His ministry? Nope. Kingdom roll is full. Sorry, you didn't make it in time. God always has open arms, and so must we. Now, this goes against a number of other models of small groups that say close your group, keep it closed. No. If Jesus doesn't close His arms, why do I close my group? If I'm in the business of trying to reach people who aren't yet part of the group. Make sense? Back to page 23. The next one is the open chair worksheet. Guess what page that's on? It's on the next page. Page 64. We have 5 minutes in this session, so we'll wrap up with this. Catch this open chair worksheet. There will come a time in your group, and there will be a time when you as co-leaders must do this open chair worksheet. Now, this is not written in your group in your training manual, so you'll need to make some notes. Here, when you pass out this worksheet, it has no page number so that you can photocopy it. And when the time comes that you use this, understand the principles. You will distribute a copy to everybody. And you ask them to ask God this question. God, who would you like me to invite to this group? When the names start coming, our job is to be what? The pen. Our job is not to take over the role of the Holy Spirit. And when that name comes, and their name, oh no, Lord, not that person. Nope, we are pleasant at church and we say, hi, happy Sabbath, praying for you, hope you have a good week. But behind our backs, behind each other's back, we're enemies and we stab each other in the back. No. If the Holy Spirit brings the name into the mind, our job is to let God do His God stuff in our life and in their life. Never give a blank piece of paper. If you give a blank piece of paper, their mind will go blank. So that's why there's just some ideas there. Family members, church family who are missing, people from work, people who live in my neighborhood, that kind of stuff, it sparks their mind. You understand the principle of the blessing list. Okay. Yeah, excuse me. That was a quiz. That was to see if you were really listening. Any questions on the open chair worksheet? Let's take a break and we'll head out. Why don't we have prayer here?